Tenochtitlan was built to work with the lake. Mexico City was built to destroy it. The lake is winning. Mexico City is sinking, not metaphorically, not gradually. Parts of the historic center are descending more than 40 centimeters a year. Satellites track it in real time. Engineers measure it block by block. And residents have learned to read it in the tilt of their door frames and the crack lines running up their walls. The city has been sinking for 300 years. The reasons are geological, but the decision that started the process was not. Mexico City sits inside a closed basin 2,200 meters above sea level. No river exits the valley. Whatever water enters, from rain, from snowmelt, from the surrounding peaks, stays. For millennia, that water formed a lake system that covered a third of the valley floor. 5 interconnected lakes. Hundreds of square kilometers of fresh water, salt water, marshland, and floating gardens. That lake system no longer exists. Or rather, it no longer exists above ground. Tenochtitlan was built to work with the lake. Mexico City was built to destroy it. The lake is winning. The question this city has been answering for 500 years, badly, repeatedly, at enormous cost, is the same question it was built to answer in the first place. What do you do with the water? Every city in this series has a survival mechanism, a specific logic that kept the organism alive across centuries of pressure. Mexico City's survival mechanism is the most paradoxical in the series. Tenochtitlan, the city that became Mexico City, was built by a civilization that understood water as a system. They manipulated it, channeled it, stored it, and farmed on top of it. Water was not a problem to be solved. It was the infrastructure. The Spanish who conquered it in 1521 did not understand that. They destroyed the hydraulic system, rebuilt the capital on the same site, and spent the next 5 centuries fighting floods, sinkholes, and water shortages, each problem a direct consequence of the solution to the previous one. This is not a story about a city that survived despite its environment. It is a story about a city that built its own crisis by misunderstanding what made survival possible in the first place. The antagonist in this story is not an army, a plague, or a rival empire. It is a decision made in 1521 that is still producing consequences in 2025. The Valley of Mexico is a bowl. Volcanic mountains on every side, no natural drainage outlet. When water enters the valley, it has nowhere to go. For tens of thousands of years, that meant a lake. Lake Texcoco at the center, salt water. Xochimilco and Calco to the south, fresh water. Zumpango and Zaltocan to the north. 5 lakes connected by channels, fed by rivers from the surrounding mountains, balanced by evaporation and seasonal fluctuation. It was not an ideal location for a city. It was an extraordinary one. The lake provided protein through fishing, fresh water through aqueducts fed by mountain springs, defense through water. No army could approach the island without using the causeways, which could be destroyed in minutes, and agricultural land through an invention that remains one of the most sophisticated forms of urban farming in pre-industrial history. The chinampa. A chinampa was not a floating garden. It was a raised agricultural platform built from alternating layers of lake vegetation and sediment, anchored by willow trees whose roots locked the platform to the lake floor. Each chinampa was surrounded by canals. The canals provided water for irrigation, passage for canoes, and a system for circulating nutrients from the lake into the soil. At its peak, the chinampa system produced multiple harvests per year on land that technically did not exist before it was built. The geography was not a liability. It was the engine. But engines require understanding, and the civilization that would inherit this one arrived with a completely different mental model of what land and water were supposed to do. In 1325, according to Mexica tradition, a group of wandering people arrived at the shores of Lake Texcoco and saw a sign: an eagle perched on a cactus, a snake in its talons on a small island near the western shore. They built there. The site was unpromising. The island was small and marshy. The surrounding water was partly salt water. Neighboring city-states controlled the more favorable ground on the mainland. That is precisely why they built there. The Mexica had no political allies and no territorial base. The island was unclaimed because no one else wanted it. In a political landscape of competing powers, a site that was difficult to attack was worth more than a site that was easy to farm. Then they solved the farming problem. Within 2 generations, the Mexica had expanded the island through Chinampa construction, connected it to the mainland with 3 major causeways, built a 14-kilometer dike to separate freshwater from saltwater zones, and engineered 2 aqueducts carrying spring water from Chapultepec. The dike, the Albarracín of Nezahualcóyotl, completed around 1449, was not simply a flood barrier. It was a hydraulic management system that maintained different water levels on either side, allowing the Chinampa zone to function as a controlled agricultural environment, while the eastern lake remained navigable. Tenochtitlan was not a city built on a lake. It was a city that had converted a lake into a city. By 1500, it was one of the 5 largest cities on Earth. The hydraulic infrastructure that made it possible was the most sophisticated urban water management system in the Western Hemisphere. It would be completely destroyed within 25 years. When Hernan Cortes arrived in 1519, Tenochtitlan had a population of roughly 200,000 people. The metropolitan area of interconnected cities around the lake, Texcoco, Tlacopan, Xochimilco, held perhaps 1 million. The Spanish had never seen anything like it. Cortes himself wrote to the King of Spain that the city was as large as Seville or Cordoba, and that its organization and infrastructure surpassed many European cities he knew. What the Spanish did not understand, and what would define the next 5 centuries, was the relationship between the city and its environment. The canals that looked like streets were drainage systems. The floating gardens that looked decorative were food production infrastructure. The dikes that looked like fortifications were hydraulic regulators. The entire urban form was an argument about how to live in a lake. Remove the lake and you remove the argument. The geometry of Tenochtitlan is still legible in the street grid of central Mexico City. The causeway that ran south from the island is now Avenida Insurgentes. The one that ran west is now Tacuba. The one that ran north is now Tepeyac. The bones survived. The physiology was about to be replaced entirely. The siege of Tenochtitlan lasted 75 days. By the time it ended on August 13, 1521, the city that Cortes had described as surpassing Seville was largely rubble. Historians estimate over 100,000 dead in the siege itself, with tens of thousands more from the smallpox epidemic that preceded it. Then Cortes made a decision that no one fully explained and everyone since has had to live with. He rebuilt the capital on the ruins, exactly where it had been. The practical logic was clear. The location commanded the lake system, which controlled the entire valley. The indigenous population, though devastated, still knew how to make the environment function. Without them, the city would not survive its first rainy season. But the Spanish did not adopt the Mexica hydraulic model. They imposed a European one. In Europe, cities were built on solid ground. Rivers were hazards to be crossed, not systems to be inhabited. Flooding was a failure of engineering, not a condition to be managed. The Albarracín of Nezahualcóyotl, the dike that had regulated the lake for 70 years, was demolished to allow Spanish ships to enter the lake. Within 30 years, the flooding began. The flood of 1555, the flood of 1580, the flood of 1607, which submerged the city for months, the flood of 1629, which kept the city underwater for 5 years. The archbishop proposed abandoning the site entirely and rebuilding on higher ground. The viceroy refused. Each flood was treated as an engineering failure. Each engineering solution accelerated the next failure. The city was not fighting the water. It was fighting the consequence of having removed the system that managed the water. The Spanish colonial response to the flooding was hydraulically ambitious and ecologically catastrophic. They decided to drain the lake. The project began in 1607 under engineer Enrico Martin. The plan was to cut a canal through the northern mountains, allowing floodwater to drain into the Tula River basin outside the valley. The work took 2 years and used 40,000 indigenous laborers. When it was completed, Martin was celebrated. Then came the flood of 1629. The drainage system had not been maintained. The canal silted up. The city submerged again. Martin was arrested. He died in prison, blamed for a failure that was structural, not personal. The draining continued for 3 centuries. By the late 19th century, President Porfirio Diaz commissioned the Grand Canal, a massive engineering project that finally succeeded in draining most of Lake Texcoco. By 1900, the lake that had sustained the most sophisticated urban civilization in pre-Columbian America was essentially gone. The engineers considered it a triumph. The ground beneath the city considered it otherwise. Lake sediment, the fine clay deposited over thousands of years at the bottom of a shallow lake, behaves very differently when it is no longer submerged. It compresses, it dries, it shrinks. And when a city of millions sits on top of it and extracts the water from below it, it collapses. The subsidence was first measured scientifically by engineer Roberto Gayal in 1925. The historic center had already sunk 7 meters since the colonial period. 7 meters. The Spanish had solved the flooding problem. The solution was that the city was now slowly disappearing into the ground where the lake used to be. By the mid-20th century, Mexico City faced a paradox that the colonial engineers had created and the modern ones inherited. The city had drained the lake that once provided its water. It now needed water from somewhere else. The solution was the aquifer. Beneath the old lake sediments, the compressible clay that was already causing the city to sink, lay a deep aquifer of fresh water that had accumulated over millennia. The city began pumping it in the 1940s, as the population exploded from 3 million in 1950 to 9 million in 1970, to 15 million in 1985. The pumping accelerated. The subsidence accelerated with it. The feedback loop was now complete. Pump the aquifer. The clay compresses. The city sinks. The pipes crack. The water leaks. Replace the lost water by pumping more. The clay compresses further. Today, the city loses approximately 40% of its water supply to leaks in pipes that have been deformed by the sinking ground. To compensate for the leaks, it pumps more water. To pump that water, it extracts more from the aquifer. The aquifer drops. The ground sinks. The pipes crack more. The 2021 metro overpass collapse that killed 26 people was attributed in part to subsidence-related stress on the infrastructure. The Metro Line 12 had been plagued by structural problems since its construction. Engineers had documented the differential subsidence, different parts of the metro sinking at different rates for years before the collapse. The lake had not forgotten where it was. The city built to replace Tenochtitlan had by the 21st century recreated exactly the crisis that the Mexica hydraulic system was designed to prevent, not through neglect, through 5 centuries of solutions that each addressed the symptom of the previous solution without understanding the underlying mechanism. Dario Solano Rojas has been measuring Mexico City's subsidence for most of his professional life. He grew up in the city. He thought that tilted buildings and buckled streets were normal, just how cities looked. They are not normal anywhere else on Earth. In 2025, NASA's NISR satellite began producing the most precise subsidence measurements in the city's history. Parts of the Eastern Historic Zone were sinking more than half an inch per month, not per year, per month. The aquifer that supplies 60% of the city's drinking water is being emptied faster than rainfall can replenish it. In 2024, the system came within months of what engineers called day zero, the point at which the supply runs dry. The city that was built because the lake provided water is now running out of water because it destroyed the lake. The dry lake bed to the east of the city is the most geologically active zone in the metropolitan area. It is also where the government has been building major infrastructure for 30 years. There is a certain logic to this that would be darkly familiar to Enrico Martin, the colonial engineer who died in prison after the flood of 1629. The available land is where the lake was. The lake was drained to create land. The land is unstable because it was a lake. Building on unstable land creates infrastructure that sinks. Sinking infrastructure requires more water to be pumped. More pumping creates more sinking. The loop has been running for 400 years. But something has changed. And it is not just the satellite technology that can now measure the sinking in real time. For the first time in the city's history, engineers, hydrologists, and urban planners are asking the question the Mexica never had to ask, because they already knew the answer. The water crisis in Mexico City is not evenly distributed. It never has been. The western and central high-income zones, Polanco, Lomas de Chapultepec, Santa Fe, sit on higher, more geologically stable ground. Their infrastructure was built more recently and sinks more slowly. Their political representation ensured priority access to the water supply system. The eastern and peripheral low-income zones sit on the old lake bed. Their ground sinks fastest. Their pipes crack most often. Their water supply is the most intermittent. Their buildings lean the most visibly. The subsidence map is also an inequality map. The people who have the least political power live on the most geologically unstable ground. The ground that was a lake, that was drained, that the city was expanded onto because it was the cheapest available land. Xochimilco is the only place in Mexico City where you can still see what the original hydraulic system looked like. It survives because it was declared a UNESCO World Heritage Site in 1987 and a protected ecological zone in 1992. Not because the city wanted to preserve it. Because external pressure forced the decision. The chinampas still produce food. The canals still function. The water still circulates. The willow trees still anchor the platforms to the lake floor. A system designed 700 years ago is still operating on the same hydrological logic, using the same techniques, producing the same results. 15 kilometers away, the city it inspired is sinking. The irony that urban hydrologists now speak of openly is this: the solution to Mexico City's water crisis may require doing something that looks, from a distance, like what the Mexica were already doing. Managed wetlands, water retention systems, working with the valley's natural hydraulics instead of against them. In 2015, architect Iñaki Echeverria won an international competition with a proposal called Texcoco Ecological Park. The plan was to partially restore the lake bed, not as the original lake, but as a managed wetland system that could absorb stormwater, reduce the heat island effect, recharge the aquifer, and stabilize the subsiding ground on the eastern edge of the city. The project was approved, then canceled, then partially revived, then canceled again, then restarted in a different form. The politics of water in Mexico City have always been more unstable than the ground. What made the proposal remarkable was not its scale, it was its premise. For the first time in 5 centuries, a major urban planning proposal for Mexico City was built on the logic that the water should stay, not as a threat to be managed, but as infrastructure to be restored. In 1978, Workers laying electrical cables near the Zocalo struck a carved stone disc 7 meters below the street surface. It was a monolith depicting the dismembered body of Coyolxauhqui, the moon goddess. The find triggered an excavation that eventually uncovered the Templo Mayor, the central pyramid of Tenochtitlan, directly beneath the colonial buildings of the historic center. The Spanish had built their capital on top of the Aztec capital, literally on top of it. The foundation stones of the Metropolitan Cathedral rest on the rubble of the Templo Mayor. The palace of the Mexican president is built over the palace of Moctezuma. The Zocalo, the most politically charged plaza in Mexican history, sits on the ceremonial center of the civilization the Spanish declared they had erased. The erasure was incomplete. It always is. The Mexica understood the valley as a system. They built infrastructure to work within it. When the system was disrupted by drought, by rival attack, by political crisis, they repaired it. The knowledge of how to repair it was encoded in the engineering guilds, in the specialists who maintained the dikes and aqueducts, in the farmers who managed the chinampas. When Cortes destroyed Tenochtitlan, he destroyed the city. He did not destroy the knowledge, not immediately. The indigenous engineers who built the first colonial drainage canals were the same people who had maintained the Aztec hydraulic system. They knew what the Spanish engineers did not, that the lake was not an obstacle. It was a mechanism. Their knowledge was gradually displaced. Their infrastructure was gradually demolished, and the mechanism stopped working. The question that 5 centuries of Mexican urban history cannot answer, and that the 21st century has made increasingly urgent, is whether a city of 22 million people can rediscover what a city of 200,000 already knew. Across 5 centuries, the central conflict of the city has never changed. Tenochtitlan was built by a civilization that asked a specific question about the Valley of Mexico. How do you live inside a lake system without being destroyed by it? The answer was hydraulic engineering of extraordinary sophistication. Dikes, chinampas, aqueducts, managed channels that converted the lake from a threat into an asset. Mexico City was built by a civilization that asked a different question. How do you eliminate the lake? The answer was drainage, canals, pumping, and a 3-century project of hydraulic extraction that converted the lake from an asset into an absence. The absence is now the problem. The mechanism is now running in reverse. The Mexica extracted water from the lake to build the Chinampa platforms. They added to the land by managing the water. The modern city extracts water from under the land, and the land collapses into where the water used to be. Same valley, same basin, same closed hydraulic system that has no natural exit. 2 completely opposite strategies for surviving inside it. One strategy produced the largest city in the pre-Columbian Americas. The other produced the largest city in North America. Both are built on the same island. Both faced the same fundamental constraint. Only one of them understood what the constraint was asking. Mexico City is not facing a water crisis. It is facing the return of the logic it refused to use. The lake is still there, under the asphalt, under the foundations, under the metro lines, compressed into sediment, drawn out through pipes, slowly reclaiming the ground it was removed from. The Mexica solved the problem of living in a lake by making the lake part of the city. Mexico City has spent 5 centuries solving the problem of the lake by making the lake disappear. The question that 5 centuries of drainage, engineering, and urban expansion have not answered is the one the Mexica answered first. If Tenochtitlan was built by understanding the water, and Mexico City was built by destroying it, which of the 2 cities actually understood the place where it lived?